everybody, and welcome to this latest episode of The Money Man. And today I'm going to talk about the life cycle of a very interesting banknote from Hong Kong. I'm going to tell you about a banknote that lived for a very long time, then it died, and then like a phoenix it rose from the ashes to live again. I'm going to tell you the story of the 10 Hong Kong dollar bill. Now, the 10 Hong Kong dollar bill has existed for a very long time, and this design that you can see right here from 1980 is actually a variation of a design that had been in production for a very, very long time. So the Hong Kong dollar, the 10 Hong Kong dollar bill, has been around for a long period of time in the territory's history. And the most iconic version is probably the HSBC version that you can see right here. So this was produced by the Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation, which is one of the commercial banks in Hong Kong that produces currency. Now, there have been many commercial banks in Hong Kong's history that have produced currency for the territory, and I'll show you another example. This is from the Chartered Bank, which is now Standard Chartered Bank. And you can see this example from 1981, so they also produced the 10 Hong Kong dollar bill, and there are some other examples that I won't go into in this video. But the 10 Hong Kong dollar bill was a very useful denomination that was widely used for a long time, right up until the mid-90s, where everything started to change. And one of the catalysts of that change was a great political change in Hong Kong's history, and that was the Handover. Now, in 1997, Hong Kong was handed from the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland to the mother country, the People's Republic of China, and Hong Kong exists today as a special administrative region of the People's Republic of China. Now, the preparation for this event required a great many changes to be made in Hong Kong society, and some of those changes can actually be seen in the symbolism used on Hong Kong banknotes. So let's have a look at an example of some of those changes. Now, here you can see we've got two Standard Chartered 10 Hong Kong dollar banknotes. The top one is from 1995, the bottom one is from 1991. And remember, the handover took place in 1997. So these are both pre-handover issues. However, there are some very major differences on the reverse. If you look at the obverse, they look almost identical. We've got some very minor changes, but overall, it's pretty much the same. If we flip onto the back, however, you can see some major changes. If we look at the note at the bottom, you can see that the colonial insignia of Hong Kong has been removed and replaced with the bauhinia flower. And the bauhinia flower was adopted as the symbol to represent Hong Kong after the handover in 1997, and you see it on the Hong Kong flag, and it's still widely used to represent Hong Kong today. So you can see some quite big changes were made in the run-up to the handover. Now, because these changes in design were being made, it also gave the commercial banks an opportunity to actually review whether or not they were going to continue the production of these banknotes. And actually, HSBC decided to no longer continue printing the 10 Hong Kong dollar bill. However, Standard Chartered Bank decided that they would continue to issue a 10 Hong Kong dollar bill, but they didn't do it for very long. And actually, this design did not last into the 2000s. So it's very, very interesting. So what replaced it? Well, if the commercial banks were no longer going to produce banknotes representing the denomination of 10, who was going to take over? Well, of course, the coinage in Hong Kong has always been managed by the government of Hong Kong, or in this instance, the Monetary Authority of Hong Kong. So the Monetary Authority of Hong Kong took over the issuing of the 10 denomination, and they replaced it with a coin. They replaced it with Hong Kong's first and only bimetallic coin, which you can see right here. So there was a period of overlap where the coin was being issued by the Hong Kong Monetary Authority. HSBC had discontinued their Hong Kong dollar $10 bill, and then Standard Chartered continued to issue an updated design of the 10 Hong Kong dollar bill, but then they decided to discontinue it. And the idea was that the coin was going to take over, and there would be no more 10 Hong Kong dollar banknote. However, that is not the end of the story. The story gets more complicated because people didn't really like this coin. And you might be thinking, well, why? It's just a coin. Well, there's an interesting reason. And for this, we need to go to wet markets. Now, Hong Kong is dominated by wet markets. They're everywhere, selling, fresh fish, vegetables for really great prices. You can pick up some great stuff for really, really cheap in the wet market. Now, a lot of pushback against the decision to get rid of the 10 Hong Kong dollar bill actually came from the wet markets. They actually found the 10 Hong Kong dollar bill very, very useful. Okay? And you can see, if you look at the gentleman in the picture, he's wearing these thick rubber gloves. And it's very difficult to handle coins when you've got wet, slippy hands covered in fish guts. So actually, there was a bit of pushback, especially from the wet market sellers. And they said, basically, we want this $10 note back. There were other areas of society which also expressed an interest in seeing the 10 Hong Kong dollar bill revived. However, the commercial banks were no longer issuing it. So what happened? Well, the coin was then replaced by a new 10 Hong Kong dollar bill. So like I said, like a phoenix from the ashes, it rose again, but in an entirely new form. And this is where it gets really interesting. Because remember, before, the commercial banks were producing the 10 Hong Kong dollar bill, but now the Hong Kong Monetary Authority had taken over the issuing of this denomination. So they had to create an entirely new design, one that did not use the imagery and symbolism of the commercial banks, as that is their intellectual property. The Hong Kong Monetary Authority had to create its own. But there was no real previous design to go upon or base it upon, because remember, this was produced after the handover. All the banknotes that were produced during the time of colonial Hong Kong had Queen Elizabeth II on, or whatever reigning monarch it was at the time. So they had to come up with an entirely new design, and this is what they got. It's completely unique. It's totally different from any other banknote issued in Hong Kong's history. It's very, very unusual. If you try and match this banknote up with the other circulating banknotes in Hong Kong, it looks very out of place. It looks like it's from a different country almost, a different place. You wouldn't think that this was a banknote circulated in the Special Administrative Region of Hong Kong, which is part of China. So it's very, very interesting. And this was used extensively in the wet markets, of course. And because of the need for a durable banknote, the Hong Kong Monetary Authority then updated the design and made it polymer. So later on, what you get is the issuing of the polymer version of the 10 Hong Kong dollar bill. And this is the only polymer banknote that we actually have in circulation in Hong Kong. So again, it shows you the difference between banknotes printed by the Hong Kong Monetary Authority and banknotes printed by the commercial banks in Hong Kong. Very, very interesting, very fascinating, very unusual actually. So of course the polymer banknote it's much more durable. It can be, it can suffer the damp much better. It doesn't matter if it gets wet or crumpled, and it can be passed between people without suffering any real major damage. So that's why polymer was used to for the design of this particular denomination, and has not been used in the other commercial banknotes. So very, very interesting, very unusual. So that's it. That's the story of the unusual story of the 10 Hong Kong dollar bill, how it died and then came back to life. It's very unusual for a banknote to, be killed off and then brought back to life. It's very, very, very unusual. So if you know of any other examples of banknotes being cut and then brought back to life again, please let me know down in the comment section, because I will do more research and I will try and find out the full story and hopefully feature it in another video, because I think this kind of stuff is really, really fascinating. So there we go. I hope you learned something new. I hope you found something interesting in this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys on the next one. It's the Money Man signing out for now. Bye-bye.